Hello everyone, welcome to part 2 of What If Sonic and Blaze Swapped Places. This is a part of a series, so if you missed the first part, it'll be linked in the description so you can go check it out. Last time we talked about what would have happened if Blaze and Sonic had swapped places during the classic era, and today we're going to be moving on to the adventure era of the Sonic franchise. But before we can get to the events of Adventure 1 proper, we need to set the scene. It's implied that there's a bit of a time gap between the events of the classic era and the modern era, which is pretty easy to see just thanks to the change in Sonic's design. And yes, I do believe that the current explanation is that this is a time skip and not that it's a different dimension. That line from Forces has been re-retconned. During this time, after going on some unknown number of adventures, Miles eventually set up a laboratory near the Mystic Ruins. With Blaze's guidance, Miles was beginning to advance a bit in his academic career, studying at a university and on his way to being a PhD student despite his age. Amy also relocated to Station Square on her own time. In canon, we don't know why Amy ended up moving. However, in this story, Blaze decided to stay closer to Miles, whereas it's implied that Sonic mostly went off on his own. Blaze would still be going on her adventures, but would return to touch base with Miles in between, and would sometimes bring Miles along with her. Considering Amy's feelings for Blaze and the fact that Miles, one of her close friends at this point, had relocated away from the islands Amy had been inhabiting and to the mainland, it's easy to imagine that Amy decided to spread her wings a bit and move to Station Square, a more populated area than the Mystic Ruins, but a location close enough that she can still keep in touch with her friends. Seeing that Amy is now being portrayed as a more competent adventurer in the classic era, Amy likely tagged along with some of Blaze's and Miles' excursions as well. Knuckles is, of course, still guarding the Master Emerald on Angel Island. There's very little anyone could do to get that knucklehead to change after all. For her part, Trip is still tied down on the Starfall Islands, and though they do try and keep in touch with their newest friend, distance is a bit of an issue. Essentially, Blaze, Miles, and Amy are a bit more of a tight-knit group at the start of the game. That's not to say that they weren't a tight-knit group in the original version of events, but it did seem like most of the Sonic crew were kind of off doing their own thing for the most part. The main difference in this timeline is that they stayed in contact more than they did when Sonic was in the Chaos Dimension. Real quick, it's time for the YouTuber call to action. I want to really quickly ask you guys to subscribe, and if you really like my content, maybe consider becoming a member to support the channel. I'll read out the name of every member at the end of each video. Anyway, back to the story. Many of the events of Sonic Adventure go very similar to in canon. Eggman discovers a series of ancient tablets telling him about Chaos and the ancient Echidna civilization. Realizing how powerful Chaos is, he goes to awaken him, hoping to use his power to take over the world. Chaos is freed from the Master Emerald, shattering it in the process. Knuckles makes the same mistake as before and runs off to try and repair the Master Emerald. Later on, Blaze is hanging out with Amy in Station Square on a quote-unquote date with her thanks to the other girl's persistence, which Blaze agreed to mostly only to appease her. At the tail end of their date, Blaze notices the police all driving off in one direction. The pair are worried, and Blaze decides to go check it out just in case, despite Amy's hesitance. There, they happen across Chaos Zero and see the police's firearms are completely ineffective against it. Sensing that Chaos is dangerous, and because she does secretly enjoy the chance to fight, Blaze jumps into action, taking out Chaos Zero while Amy watches on in awe. After forcing Chaos into his puddle form, Blaze attempts to evaporate what's left of the creature, only to realize that she can't. For whatever reason, the water composing Chaos's body won't boil at a normal temperature. A bit confused, Blaze gives up before her fire could risk harming anyone or the environment around them. Blaze talks to Amy, and the pair decide to ask Miles, the smartest person they know, what he thinks of all of this. The next day, Blaze returns to Miles' workshop only to find that he's not there, which is very peculiar. She then discovers that the Inferno is missing as well, and is able to put two and two together. After running around a bit to find Miles, she arrives at Emerald Coast just in time to watch the plane go down. She rushes to Miles' side and, after making sure that he's okay, asks Miles for his advice. Miles says that he has no idea what's going on and that whatever Blaze encountered sounds very powerful, and then says he'll look into it. Then he elaborates on the improvements he made to the Inferno, specifically how he'd incorporated Chaos Emerald as its power source. Blaze is pretty impressed with Miles, and the two decide to head back to his workshop as in canon. There, they meet Eggman and fight him as normal, and Eggman is able to steal away the Chaos Emerald from Miles, hopefully in a less lame-looking way than what happens in Sonic Adventure. They then witness Chaos absorbing the emeralds and becoming more powerful, at which point Blaze comes to the same conclusion as Sonic and begins to seek out the other Chaos Emeralds. Things go about the same way as in canon for a while. Blaze and Miles retrieve the Chaos Emeralds from Casino Park, Windy Valley, and Ice Cap, but this time Eggman doesn't just steal the Chaos Emerald they get from Casino Park immediately. Knuckles still gets tricked by Eggman while searching for shards of the Master Emerald, which isn't a plot point I love, but there's no way for me to justify it not happening in this version of events. This leads to the fight with Knuckles in the Mystic Ruins. This is a pretty close fight that leaves both Blaze and Knuckles weakened, which is of course what Eggman had been planning. He manages to steal all 3 of the Chaos Emeralds from them and feed them to Chaos, which leads to the best boss fight in Sonic Adventure 1. Seriously, so glad we had to do this 3 times. After defeating Chaos 4, Blaze snaps at Knuckles, claiming that this is all his fault. If he hadn't been tricked by Eggman again, none of this would have happened. Knuckles gets a bit defensive, and the two begin bickering. Miles eventually stops them, reminding them that this won't get them anywhere, to which they eventually agree. Blaze demands that Knuckles help them get the Chaos Emeralds back, but Knuckles declines, saying that Angel Island crashed into the sea and he has to return it to the sky. Blaze relents, seeing this as a good enough reason, and they part ways on not so great terms. Blaze and Miles will chase Eggman on the Inferno, but not quite be able to catch up to him. They'll be separated, and Miles will go on his own adventure to upgrade the Inferno further, while Blaze will try and track down Eggman, eventually finding him after her encounter with Tikal in Lost World. While she's doing that, Miles will be saving Station Square from the missile that Eggman launches, his first time fighting Eggman without Blaze's help. Knuckles and Big's campaigns don't intersect that much with Blaze, so they'll go very similar to canon. However, Amy's story will diverge just a bit more this time around. In addition to the changes to the timeline that this AU has created, Amy's depiction in the classic era has changed quite a bit from SA1's release. Whereas at the time of Sonic Adventure's release, Amy had legitimately been little more than a damsel in distress, she's nowadays shown to be an adventurer to rival all the boys. To be clear, this isn't a commentary on how Amy's character was being handled in this game or at the time of this game's release, just an observation of how things have changed over the years. On top of this general change in her depiction, Amy has been going on adventures with Blaze and Miles for a lot longer in this timeline, meaning that Amy is likely much more of a fighter in this version of events than she was in the original. So, after finding Birdie and being initially chased by E100 Zero and asking Blaze to look after the Flicky, to which Blaze declines, Amy is actually able to evade capture by Zero entirely, destroying him like she does at the end of her campaign without being captured. We know Amy is more than capable of beating Zero. It's more that she didn't believe this was something she was capable of at the start of Sonic Adventure. Now that she's more experienced with going on adventures and fighting badniks, she'll likely have the confidence to face the robot down immediately. This leads to an entirely different question though, which is, what is Amy going to be doing for the rest of the game? Well, Birdie does still have a Chaos Emerald, so Eggman isn't going to let them get away that easily. Not to mention, Amy is still trying to find the rest of Birdie's family. So, after Eggman sends the E100 series after Amy and she defeats them and realizes that Birdie's family is stuck inside them, Amy resolves to get the rest of Birdie's family back. This is where her story will cross over with Gamma's. Gamma, after retrieving Froggy, will soon receive news that several of his brothers have been destroyed by one of Blaze's friends. At this point, Gamma hasn't met Amy and therefore hasn't had his eyes open quite yet. However, he's still obviously capable of feeling. In this timeline, hearing that his brothers have been destroyed enrages Gamma. He swears revenge on whoever it is that did this and goes out on his own to hunt them down. Soon, Gamma and Amy come face to face. Amy just thinks that this is another one of Eggman's robots and attempts to fight him normally, but quickly realizes that she was entirely mistaken. Gamma's rage has fueled him to become far more than the rest of his siblings. As they're fighting, Gamma talks about what Amy has done, how she destroyed his family. All the while, guilt slowly starts to overwhelm Amy, slowing her down, preventing her from fighting against Gamma properly. Eventually, Amy is overwhelmed and Gamma wins, though he is thoroughly damaged. As Gamma prepares to finish off Amy, she does something that he doesn't expect. She apologizes. Amy, in tears, apologizes for taking Gamma's brothers away from him. She explains that she was only trying to save Birdie's family, who Eggman had kidnapped and used to power Gamma's brothers. She had never imagined that the things she was destroying were actually people. Finally, she begs Gamma to at least spare Birdie and the members of his family that she's rescued so far. Gamma is completely taken aback by Amy's actions, and suddenly he's begun asking questions that he never had to before. At this point, the only thing that Gamma really understands is family and how important his brothers are to him. So learning that their creation involved ripping apart a family shakes him to his core. Before either Gamma or Amy can act further, Eggman appears. He congratulates Gamma for his efforts and snatches Birdie away, telling Gamma to follow. The pair leave a distraught Amy behind. Not only had Amy just learned that the robots she'd been fighting were her family, but she had even failed to protect Birdie. While it's tempting for her to just wallow in self-pity, she picks herself up quickly. The only thing that matters right now is saving Birdie. At this point, the fight aboard the egg carrier would have already taken place, though this time with Chaos 5 instead of Chaos 6, as Eggman hadn't yet recovered the Chaos Emerald from Birdie. This means that Eggman is probably still searching for Chaos after his defeat aboard the egg carrier, so Amy doesn't need to ask Miles or anyone else for assistance reaching it all the way up in the sky. Instead, she runs after where she last saw Eggman and Gamma, eventually catching up to them. She yells at Eggman and says that she won't allow him to take Birdie, to which he simply scoffs. Eggman says that he's had about enough of this girl, and considering that Gamma is damaged, it's time to try out his newest creation. Suddenly, E-101 Beta Mark II appears before them, ready for battle. As Amy is already hurt from her fight with Gamma, the likelihood she'll be able to defeat this improved model of the E-100s is very low, and she's more than aware of this. Before Amy can decide how to respond, Beta attacks Amy. Amy cowers in fear, but the missile detonates without hitting her. When Amy looks up, she sees Gamma standing in front of her, protecting her from the blast. Eggman yells and screams at Gamma, probably insulting him, but Amy can hardly even hear the man. All she can focus on is Gamma and how he had sacrificed himself for her. This act of kindness is enough to reinvigorate Amy, and she pushes herself past her limits to fight against Beta. She eventually manages to defeat Beta, just barely, destroying him for good. Eggman escapes with the Chaos Emerald, releasing Birdie as he never really wanted the bird anyway and scoffing at the failures of his creations. Meanwhile, Amy kneels next to Gamma. The robot hasn't quite powered down yet, and Amy still has time to ask him a single question. Why? Why would he sacrifice himself for her? Gamma answers simply that one of his directives is to protect Birdie's family, and that includes Amy. After that, Gamma powers down, and Amy has to run away before he self-destructs and releases Birdie's family member. The family is reunited, but Amy can't look away from Gamma and Beta's remains. She can't help but wonder if there is more she could have done, some way to save all of them and not only Birdie and his family. With those thoughts on her mind, Amy returns home with Birdie's family in tow. Now that we've seen how Amy and Gamma's stories have changed, all that's left is the last hurrah. At this point, things will go pretty by the book. Blaze assumes Chaos is finished for good, only to be set up for a rude awakening once Eggman crashes onto Angel Island. Chaos gets the last Chaos Emerald from Miles' plane, the Inferno 2, and eventually ravages Station Square. Blaze is able to achieve Super Blaze with the Chaos Emerald's power, and she fights Perfect Chaos. Unlike Sonic, who immediately recognized that trapping Chaos within the Master Emerald again wouldn't work, Blaze at first agrees with Tikal's plan. In fact, as the fight continues, Blaze begins to believe that she can do even better. Her power is so immense, her flames so bright and hot, that she believes that she can finish Chaos for good. At the apex of their battle, as Blaze prepares to strike Chaos down, she hears the creature cry out. The cry carries emotions that she recognizes, and it prompts her to look back on the visions of the past that Tikal had shown her. Blaze then recognizes that Chaos was only acting to protect others, just like she is, and this thought prompts her to give Chaos mercy. She merely defeats Chaos, and once he's reduced back down to Chaos Zero, Blaze shows Tikal and Chaos the Chow, living peacefully on Earth alongside the other people of the world. The anger inside Chaos finally dissipates, and Tikal and Chaos are finally at peace, just like in the original version of the story. After Chaos's defeat, things seem like they're going to return to normal. Knuckles apologizes to Blaze for causing her trouble earlier, though he's quiet about it so that no one else can hear, and Blaze waves him off, saying that she was giving into her frustration and that he's not to blame, Eggman is. Knuckles makes his way back to Angel Island like normal. Miles returns to his workshop, but Amy's home was presumably destroyed by Chaos, and she currently has nowhere to stay. Miles says that they can make some room at his workshop for the time being, but Amy declines. After what she experienced, Amy realizes that she's been relying on Blaze far too much. She wants to make a change in her life and attempt to become stronger. She has family in Central City that she can stay with long enough to find a new place, and the change in scenery should help Amy find her path forward. Blaze and Miles both say that it's a good idea, but they'll miss her. Amy assures them that they'll see her again soon. After Blaze and Miles return to Miles' workshop, Miles begins work on some machines to help rebuild Station Square. Remember that in this story, Miles is a lot more invested in his studies than Tails is due to prompting from Blaze. As it turns out, these inventions prove to be a huge help, and his genius does not go unnoticed. Soon, Miles gets word from one of the best engineering universities in the country, nay, the world, offering him a full-ride scholarship. This is a huge opportunity, one that Blaze urges Miles to accept, but Miles says that he'll have to attend in person, and that the scholarship only pays for him. Blaze won't have anywhere to stay near the university. If Miles takes the scholarship, Blaze and Miles will have to be separated. Blaze understands Miles' hesitance, but says that she would hate to hold him back. If Miles is ready to take the step, Blaze is too. He smiles and then thanks Blaze. Soon, Miles heads off to a new university, leaving Blaze alone in the workshop. Blaze continues to keep a lookout for Eggman and any new schemes he would hatch, going on her own adventures in the meantime. Things seem to be going well for all of our heroes. However, as days turn to weeks and weeks turn to months, and as Blaze spends every day doing the same thing over and over with only infrequent interruptions from her friends, she finds that she has a difficult time continuing on. Going on her adventures has lost its luster, and she can't help but worry that she isn't doing enough. What if Eggman is completing a plot right under her nose? Blaze looks at the destruction of Station Square almost daily on her patrols and feels immense guilt at not being able to stop it from happening in the first place. Worse, Blaze is lonely. Blaze and Sonic are very different people. While Sonic is fine spending extended periods of time on his own and being a bit of a drifter, Blaze seems like she'd have a much harder time with extended periods of isolation. Not to mention that in this version of events, isolation is one of the main features of Blaze's backstory. She would be affected by these feelings far more than Sonic, and this is the first time since she met Miles that Blaze hasn't had someone around for this long. All of these feelings combined push Blaze to a breaking point, and eventually, Blaze realizes that she needs help. Blaze takes a short jog over to Central City to talk to Amy, as she doesn't want her little brother feeling guilty for leaving her behind. Blaze and Amy have a discussion, and Amy suggests that if Blaze is having these kinds of problems, then maybe it's time for a change. Amy moving to Central City and subsequently doing some volunteer work alongside going on her adventures had been great for her. Maybe a change like that could help Blaze. This idea takes a hold in Blaze's mind, and she thinks on what she could do in the future. She wants to keep using her skills to help people. She's too good at fighting to not use that skill against Eggman in the future. She just needs more resources to help her find Eggman and stop him before he can hurt people. And more than anything, Blaze wants to be a part of a team. Blaze spends a few days searching around for something that meets those criteria, and she soon stumbles upon the answer. Blaze finds a little agency by the name of Guardian Units of Nations, and as it turns out, her reputation precedes her. Gunn is more than happy to have her after she handled Perfect Chaos all on her own, and Blaze is offered a lucrative salary for her troubles. Now, I feel like this might be a bit of a controversial plot development, but I think it does make sense for Blaze to behave this way. Blaze at this point in the story is far more accepting of authority than Sonic is, and is someone who actively seeks out structure. It's also very important to remember that at this point, no one has any idea about what went down on the Ark. As far as anyone knows, Gunn has a squeaky clean reputation. Blaze, as far as she can tell, has no reason to be suspicious of them. Anyway, Blaze is able to quickly make her way up the ranks. As far as we can tell, most of the Gunn operatives aren't all that competent, so Blaze would easily stand out amongst her peers. Blaze is sent on some missions to gather the Chaos Emeralds for them, and reasoning that they're safest with Gunn, Blaze obliged, and the ease with which she performs these tasks is extremely impressive to Gunn leadership. In fact, her performance is so exceptional that the commander of Gunn, Abraham Towers, wants to meet with Blaze personally. Just to butt in here, I think in canon Towers becomes the commander of Gunn after SA2, but we're introducing him here now because it makes the story more interesting. Anywho, Blaze is honored by this, of course, and quickly becomes very proud of her position within Gunn. They even listen to her when she voices her concerns about Eggman, and the additional resources they provide give Blaze the impression that she'll be able to stop whatever scheme Eggman cooks up next. That about sums up where every character is around the time that SA2 starts. Eggman breaks into a Gunn base where Shadow is being held after discovering the existence of an ultimate weapon in his grandfather's journal. He unleashes Shadow as per usual, and then attempts to steal the Master Emerald during Knuckles and Rouge's first encounter, as happens in canon. Now, before we get too ahead of ourselves, let's acknowledge an elephant in the room. Most people would probably assume that Shadow would be an alternate version of Blaze in this AU, or maybe even a completely new character built to be a mirror image of Blaze. And while that would make sense if this were an alternate universe where everything was different, all that happens in this AU is that Blaze and Sonic are teleported to each other's dimension when they're born. Shadow was created decades before either of their births, so the pair switching places wouldn't change anything about him. As far as we know, Gerald built Shadow based on the mural on Angel Island, and as we saw in the last part, that mural has not changed. It is only a theory that this is where Gerald got the idea to make Shadow a hedgehog though, and we're not quite sure exactly why Shadow looks the way he does. Whatever reasons there are for Shadow's specific form, they wouldn't have changed in this specific version of events. Anyway, back to the story. As soon as she hears about Eggman's involvement, Blaze rushes to Central City to talk with Commander Towers. They both agree to have her work on the case, and Blaze says that they need to keep a close eye on the Chaos Emeralds now that they know Eggman has one of them. Gunn, of course, knows that Eggman has at least one of the emeralds, as they would be needed to let Shadow out of his containment. Gunn had most of the other Chaos Emeralds in their safe, but one was being held in a bank. To make sure that Eggman couldn't get his hands on any more, Blaze was assigned to guard that specific Chaos Emerald. Of course, Shadow eventually arrives to rob the bank and steal the Chaos Emerald. He dispatches most of the Gunn soldiers with ease, making his way into the bank where he's stopped by Blaze. Blaze is initially confused, expecting Eggman to be the one stealing the emerald. Blaze asks Shadow who he is and what he's up to. Shadow is evasive, and Blaze follows up by asking if Shadow's working for Eggman. Shadow says no. Eggman is working for him. That's all Blaze needs to hear. She launches into action, attacking Shadow with intent to stop him by any means necessary. The two fight for some time, though eventually Shadow overpowers Blaze and tosses her out of the bank's window. Blaze manages to catch herself before she falls to the ground, launching herself back inside only to find that Shadow has disappeared. She realizes he's gone to the vault and gives chase, but she's too late. When she arrives, Shadow has the Chaos Emerald in hand. Blaze makes her presence known, not seeing the point in an ambush. She says most people would have died from a fall that high. He could have killed her. Shadow laughs and asks if she expects him to apologize. Blaze shakes her head and just says that attempting to murder a Gunn agent is quite a charge, and that gives Shadow pause. He smiles and says that he wasn't sure if Blaze was with them or not, but he's glad that she is, because that means that he doesn't have to hold back. Faster than Blaze can react, he activates Chaos Control, teleporting behind her. Blaze is blindsided by his next attack, and they have another battle. Though, calling it a battle is generous. Now that Shadow has the benefit of Chaos Control, as well as getting the opportunity to ambush Blaze before she knew about the ability, it's a complete curb stomp. Blaze is losing badly, and Shadow is true to his word. He's not holding back at all. Eventually, reinforcements arrive, and Shadow warps away before they can catch him. Blaze does try to give chase, but as soon as she runs into gun personnel, they stop her. She's clearly in no shape to fight. As much as Blaze wants to stop the mysterious thief, she can't argue. Continuing from here would only put herself and others in danger. Blaze reports back to the commander, telling him that she failed at her mission, the first time she has ever had to do so. Worse than the mark on her pride is the worry that seeps into her mind. Now that the new Hedgehog and Eggman had 2 Chaos Emeralds, what would they do with them? Whatever it was, Blaze knew it wouldn't be good. She wants to get out into the field immediately, but her commander orders her to take things easy for the time being. She needs rest, and as much as Blaze wants to disagree, her respect for her commanding officer prevents her from doing so. Blaze spends the next day recovering from her fight. She scans over whatever info Gunn has on Eggman's whereabouts, and while they couldn't pinpoint his location, they were making solid progress. Blaze, at the very least, felt optimistic about their chances. Not too long into the day, she's told she has visitors. Confused, Blaze says that they can come in, and she's surprised to see Amy and Miles have come to see her. They had both seen her fight with the Hedgehog on the news, and were worried about Blaze's safety. She says that she's been through much worse. Blaze just needs a couple of days to recover, and she'll be ready to stop Eggman. The conversation continues a bit past that. Amy dotes on Blaze a bit excessively, and Miles rants and raves about all the cool tech in Gunn's facilities. Eventually, Miles offers to help track Eggman down, as he has some new experimental tech that could maybe pinpoint his location. Blaze considers it and says that they could probably work something out with Gunn. Later, Blaze has a long conversation with the higher-ups about using Miles' tech. It's likely to be a huge headache in terms of red tape, thanks to Gunn being a government organization and Miles still being a minor, but Blaze is able to get permission for Miles and Amy to help track down Eggman thanks to how much promise Miles' tech shows. They give Blaze the go-ahead to have Amy along with her on a mission to find Eggman, with Miles providing tech support. A day or so passes for Blaze to recover from her fight, and the group is off to hunt down Eggman. On their way to his location, they run into Knuckles. He's still been repairing the Master Emerald this whole time, though that is a bit of a side quest unrelated to the main plot, so there's not that much to say about it. Knuckles asks what's up, and Amy and Blaze catch him up on the new Hedgehog and that Eggman has stolen a Chaos Emerald. Knuckles says that he's too busy to help right now, but he'll lend a hand as soon as he fixes the Master Emerald. Blaze huffs, but ultimately agrees. Afterwards, they run off to catch Eggman, finding his desert base. They manage to break in and capture Dr. Eggman after a long and dangerous journey. Before they can investigate further, Eggman activates a self-destruct sequence, destroying any evidence they could have recovered. They're able to escape the base before it explodes with Eggman in tow, and escort him to Prison Island. Blaze, Amy, Miles, and the commander all arrive on the island. Blaze and the commander to interrogate the doctor, and Amy and Miles because they couldn't convince them to stay behind. Eggman is predictably uncooperative, but Blaze really isn't that upset either way. The Mad Doctor is finally behind bars, and everything should be fine. The only unanswered question now is the whereabouts of the 2 Chaos Emeralds Eggman had on him, but they have a team digging through the rubble of Eggman's base, so it shouldn't take too long to check that off the list. Blaze does go ahead and check in on that investigation after the interrogation fell through, with Amy and Miles alongside her. Miles perks up at some of the specs the team had recovered. Miles recognized them as blueprints for a matter transporter, essentially a teleporter. Miles frowns after this realization, looking through the other recovered materials and pictures they had. It seemed the project had already been completed, and if that was the case, why hadn't Eggman simply used it to escape? Blaze and Amy are both dumbfounded, but their confusion didn't have that long to sink in. Suddenly, the area goes dark. The entire island had lost power, which should be impossible. They had their own generators and backup generators, failsafe after failsafe, to prevent this exact eventuality. Their wireless communication had also been knocked out mysteriously. The entire facility had gone blind in an instant. All Gunn personnel panic trying to remedy the situation, Blaze included, until she suddenly remembers something. Eggman. Using her fire as a guide, the 3 run back to his cell, only to find it empty. The guards around the area have been taken out of commission, seemingly without any resistance. With Eggman at large once again, the group immediately takes action. They run off in search of the Mad Doctor when Blaze gets a call from the commander, the comms having been restored over this span of time. The commander says that the vault has been broken into and their Chaos Emeralds are missing. Worse, the hedgehog from earlier has been spotted on the premises. The commander expects foul play is responsible for their current situation. Eggman hadn't been captured. He had used Blaze to infiltrate the premises. Blaze is irate, launching ahead of Miles and Amy in their search for Eggman and the others. They get separated, and soon Blaze happens upon Eggman and the mysterious hedgehog, as well as one person that she doesn't recognize. Eggman is in his Eggwalker, holding the Chaos Emeralds with Shadow below him, holding onto one emerald for himself. Above the pair flies a white bat, Rouge, who, at this point, Blaze has only heard of through Knuckles. Blaze attacks them without hesitation, causing Shadow to leap into action and fight back. Eggman says that he should have expected Blaze would still be here, and tells Shadow to take care of her while he and Rouge finish their plan. Shadow says that he'd love to, and Blaze and Shadow have their second showdown. Now that Blaze has seen Chaos Control before, she's much better at holding her own. Enough that the pair can have a bit of a conversation while they're fighting. Blaze asks Shadow what he's going to do with the Chaos Emeralds. He just asks Blaze what she thinks that she's doing. Blaze says she's protecting people, and Shadow just laughs bitterly. He says that Gun is full of scum from top to bottom, and that they don't protect anybody. Blaze snaps at him, asking him what he knows, and Shadow responds, "Far more than you do, clearly." The conversation just enrages Blaze further. Blaze had spent the last several months working with Gun to make the world a safer place. Hearing him put down their efforts angered her to no end. She redoubled her effort in battling him, but she wasn't quite able to overcome the power of Chaos Control because, let's be honest, that shit is pretty OP. Blaze was able to keep up with Shadow better, standing on nearly even ground with him this time around, but she was still losing the fight. Eventually, Shadow gets the upper hand and knocks Blaze to the ground. Blaze has difficulty getting to her feet, staring at Shadow above her. The hedgehog summons a Chaos Spear and begins speaking. He says that her efforts were admirable, and she is quite an impressive fighter in her own right. Unfortunately, no one is a match for the ultimate life form. He hurls a Chaos Spear at Blaze, and Blaze closes her eyes, bracing for impact, but it never comes. Instead, she hears the familiar whirring of a pair of tails. Miles swooped in at the last second and saved Blaze, wicking her away to safety. Blaze's relief is short-lived. Before Miles can escape, Shadow teleports over to them and smacks Miles away. The two skid across the ground, Miles clearly hurt. Shadow speaks again, saying that he's happy to see Miles Prower here, dropping the young boy's name. Miles is confused. "You know my name?" he asks. Shadow nods. "Yes, I know a lot about you, Miles. Child prodigy, savior of Station Square, and most importantly, the person in possession of the 7th and final Chaos Emerald. You're going to have to come with me." Miles' eyes go wide and he steps back. Blaze pushes herself off the floor, yelling at Shadow to leave Miles alone. This fight is between him and Blaze, no one else. Shadow disagrees. Everyone is involved in his revenge. Blaze turns to Miles and tells him to run, and the boy listens to her. He takes off at impressive speed, but Shadow is faster. Shadow catches up to the boy and grabs him before teleporting away, leaving Blaze alone. She finally manages to force herself to her feet and runs off, running out of the facility and trying to find her little brother. She's far past her limit at this point, but she doesn't care. She can't leave Miles alone. She's nearly outside when the commander radios for her again, saying that Eggman had rigged the island to explode and they needed her to dispose of the bombs. Blaze says that Eggman kidnapped Miles and she has to go to save him and that someone else can deal with that situation. The commander tells her that he already gave Blaze an order. Blaze pauses, wanting to talk back to the commander and tell him that Miles is more important, but she can't. She fulfills her duty, running around the island and preventing its imminent destruction despite her current condition, telling herself that as soon as Prison Island is safe, she can go help Miles. When she's finally finished, Blaze is in rough shape. Exhausted and overworked, Blaze is barely able to stand, but that doesn't matter. Saving Miles is more important. She won't let him get hurt. As she steps out of the facility, she feels a hand on her shoulder. It's Amy. The other girl tells Blaze that she's in no condition to work right now, let alone fight. Blaze swats her hand away, upset, and says that that isn't important right now. The only thing that matters is saving Miles, and that no one is going to stand in her way. Amy searches for something to say, but eventually her expression hardens. Amy says that that's fine. If Blaze won't listen to reason, Amy will do things her way. Amy pulls out her hammer and says that if Blaze can beat her in a fight, she can go and fight Eggman. Blaze pauses and admits that with how she is right now, Amy would probably win. Amy responds by saying that if Blaze can't beat her, she'll have no chance against Eggman anyway. Finally, Blaze understands what Amy was doing. This was the point she'd been trying to make the entire time. And while Blaze understands she can't abandon Miles like this, Amy tells her that she isn't abandoning him, and Blaze finally lets Amy comfort her as they head back inside. Many, many miles away, Miles is tied down with Eggman, Rouge, and Shadow all staring at the boy. Miles didn't have the Chaos Emerald on him when Shadow had taken him, and the three had been trying to interrogate him as to its whereabouts. Miles had remained tight-lipped so far, but he was already starting to get overwhelmed. Eggman had offered up some more extreme methods of getting the information they needed, but Rouge steps in before anything can happen. Gathering intel is her job, after all. She knows how to find the final Chaos Emerald without a fuss, as long as Eggman is willing to trust her. Eggman, suspicious, decides to let Rouge handle this little wrinkle in their plan. Shadow says to meet him on the Ark and walks off, and Eggman soon follows, leaving Rouge and Miles alone in the room. Rouge leans over to Miles and, with a smile, says the boy doesn't have to worry. He'll be home soon. The next day, Blaze is having a pretty awful time. Having been defeated twice in a row and letting her brother get taken away left her feeling both physically and mentally exhausted. She was being given another day to rest and recuperate before her next mission while Gunn recovered from the attack. While Amy had consoled her, it wasn't enough to improve her mood long term. Blaze had spent the entire day sulking in her quarters, but eventually she received a call from someone she didn't recognize. The Gunn communication systems were private, so any communications she received were likely important, but after talking with the commander earlier, she thought that she would be left alone for the rest of the day. Blaze turns on the communicator and hears a voice that she's never heard before. The voice introduces herself as Rouge, and Blaze grows enraged. She asks the woman what she thinks she's doing, and Rouge says simply that she has a business proposition for Blaze. Rouge asks Blaze if she knows where Miles' Chaos Emerald is. Blaze does, but she says nothing. Rouge laughs and says she'll take that as a yes, and continues. She explains that Rouge and her business partners are willing to offer a trade. Miles for the Chaos Emerald. If Blaze brings them the final emerald, Rouge will let Miles go free. No questions asked. Blaze trembles with fury, but she calms herself down enough to think. She wants to say yes, she wants nothing more than to have Miles safe and in her arms again, but she just can't. As much as it pained her to say it, protecting the world was more important than protecting just one person, even if that person was Miles. Blaze relays this to Rouge, her voice shaking, and Rouge is silent. Blaze wonders if she ended the call, but then she hears someone else speak. Miles. The boy sounds scared, but he's staying strong. He tells Blaze to give them what they want, that it'll all be okay. Blaze is taken aback and asks Miles if he's sure. Miles asks Blaze if she trusts him, and she says that of course she does. Miles tells Blaze that if they give them the Chaos Emerald, everything will be okay. Blaze, as conflicted as she is, trusts her little brother. Blaze sneaks out of the base, telling no one where she's going. Gunn would be incredibly upset with her going behind their back like this. Soon, Blaze is back at Miles' old workshop. He had hidden the Chaos Emerald there so no one could find it. As Blaze is retrieving the emerald, she's interrupted by Amy. The girl's upset and says she can't believe that Blaze is doing this again after the talk they had yesterday. Understanding the miscommunication, Blaze quickly explains what had happened, emphasizing that she's only doing this because Miles asked her to. Amy is confused as giving Eggman the final Chaos Emerald seems like an awful idea, but they both trust Miles enough to go along with this plan. Amy asks to come along with Blaze to the trade-off, and not seeing any reason why she couldn't, Blaze lets her tag along. They meet with Rouge at the specified drop spot. It's only her there, much to Blaze's confusion, and she asks Rouge where Miles is. Rouge just says that the boy is safe, then raises her eyebrow at Amy and says that she didn't know they would have company. After a bit of arguing, Rouge explains that they still have Miles in captivity and will release him once they have the emerald. Blaze is still unsure about all of this, but she makes the trade-off anyway. Blaze and Amy leave to return to Central City, both nervous about what had taken place. Every second that goes by, Blaze feels less and less certain about handing the final Chaos Emerald over. While they're talking, something happens. Eggman appears on every TV screen around them, introducing himself to the world. Eggman explains what the Eclipse Cannon is and gives a demonstration of its power, shattering the moon as Blaze watches in horror. Eggman says that the world has 24 hours to meet its demands and ends the broadcast. Blaze is horrified, realizing that she may have doomed the entire planet by giving away the Chaos Emerald. Forget Gun being mad at her for going behind their back, Miles and everyone else she cared about was in danger. Before she can get too overwhelmed, Amy helps her calm down. Amy says that they'll stop Eggman before he can hurt anyone, just like always. Once she's calm enough to think rationally again, Blaze tries to focus on the task at hand. Now, they know Eggman's plan and where he is. All they need to do is find a way up to the Ark where they can stop him. Blaze remembers the rocket at Eggman's desert base, which was undamaged given the last intel from Gun. Blaze and Amy could sneak into the base and use the shuttle to reach the Ark. After deciding on this course of action, they begin to make their way over to the base when they run into Knuckles again. Turns out he had been looking for Blaze. Knuckles and Rouge have been having their little rivalry this entire time, and Knuckles has realized that the last few pieces of the Master Emerald are with Rouge, and given the announcement from Eggman, he now knows where they are. He asks if Blaze has a way to get to the Ark, and after sharing a brief glance, Amy and Blaze invite Knuckles along with them, reasoning that he'll be helpful in the fight against Eggman. They make quick work of getting past the Gun guards and make their way onto the shuttle, launching themselves into space. In just a few hours, they're on the Ark and ready to confront Eggman. Once on the Ark, Amy, Blaze, and Knuckles all split up. Blaze searching for a way to shut down the Eclipse Cannon, and Amy searching for Miles. Blaze wanted to save Miles herself, but the three had reasoned that she was the more powerful out of her and Amy, and Knuckles would be busy dealing with Rouge. With everyone having received their objective, they all set off on their own. First off, Knuckles and Rouge have their encounter above the lava pit. There aren't many changes to this part of the story, but I do want to mention that the pair do grow closer over the course of this adventure. After that encounter, Rouge disappears into the Ark, Miles' Chaos Emerald in hand. She finds her way to Eggman and Shadow, who have Miles with them on the Ark, still restrained. She presents them the Chaos Emerald, saying that they now have everything they need to complete their plan. Eggman nods and then tells Shadow to inspect the emerald. Rouge is confused and asks why they don't simply put it in the Eclipse Cannon already. Eggman says that they have to be sure that they're not being toyed with. Shadow takes the emerald before Rouge can react, and after a moment, he looks at Eggman and confirms that it's a fake. You see, Rouge, as we all know, is working with Gun this entire time and is trying to sabotage Eggman's plan. Once she was given time alone with Miles, she learned about his skills as an engineer and his ability to create a fake Chaos Emerald. With this, the pair developed a plan to sabotage the Eclipse Cannon. If Rouge could get a Chaos Emerald to Miles, he would be able to create a fake that they could put into the cannon just like they did in the original version of the story. This is why Miles told Blaze to give Rouge the Chaos Emerald, by the way. He knew that Rouge could be trusted. Unfortunately, their plan had been sniffed out. Once Rouge's treachery had been exposed, Shadow attacked her. The woman attempted to escape, but was unable to keep up with the Hedgehog and was quickly defeated. Rouge was restrained alongside Miles, and Eggman and Shadow began interrogating Rouge as to the location of the real Chaos Emerald. During the interrogation, an alarm goes off, alerting Eggman and Shadow to Blaze's and Amy's presence. Shadow runs off to intercept the intruders, and Rouge uses the opportunity to weaken Miles' bonds. Once Shadow is gone, Rouge tells Miles to break out of his restraints and to go grab the Chaos Emerald and guard it with his life. Miles escapes Eggman, who then calls up Shadow and tells him about the situation before getting into his Eggwalker and giving chase. So, at this point, a ton of characters are racing around the Ark for several purposes. Blaze and Amy are searching for the Eclipse Cannon and Miles respectively. Miles is searching for the place Rouge has hidden the real Chaos Emerald, and Shadow and Eggman are trying to stop Blaze, Amy, and Miles before they can accomplish their objectives. The first to find what they're looking for is Miles, who grabs a hold of the Chaos Emerald and then runs off to try and find Blaze, Amy, or Knuckles for backup. Unfortunately for him, the first person he runs into is Shadow. Shadow demands that Miles give him the Chaos Emerald peacefully, but Miles refuses. After Miles fails to comply to his demands, Shadow resorts to violence. Miles is a tough kid, but he's still a kid, and Shadow is one of the most powerful creatures on the planet. Miles is no match for him, but he doesn't give up. Even after Shadow has beaten him, Miles holds the Chaos Emerald close to his chest, preventing Shadow from grabbing it. Shadow grows increasingly frustrated with Miles' tenacity and becomes increasingly brutal as a result. In a fit of anger, Shadow throws Miles against the walls of the Ark with all of his strength, knocking the young fox out and sending the Chaos Emerald skittering across the ground. The Chaos Emerald falls at the feet of Blaze, who had been attracted to the area by the sound of Miles' voice. Blaze's eyes go first to the Chaos Emerald, then to Miles' limp body on the ground, completely still, and then finally to Shadow, the person responsible for hurting her little brother. Blaze clenches the Chaos Emerald in her fist and then descends upon Shadow in a fit of rage. The two have their final battle, and immediately Shadow can tell that something is different. Blaze is faster and stronger than she was ever before, easily keeping up with Shadow and perhaps even surpassing him. Shadow wonders if she's drawing power from the Chaos Emerald, but soon he recognizes what's actually happening. He can see the rage in her eyes, hear the hatred in her voice, and he understands in an instant what's fueling her in this fight. So, how does it feel? Shadow says. How does it feel to be powerless to protect those you care about? How does it feel to watch everything you've ever fought for be ripped away from you in an instant? Blaze growls back at him. Shut up. You have no right to speak after what you've done. You're a monster and I'll destroy you. That's all the pair say to each other. Blaze's fury is immeasurable and it drives her to greater and greater heights. She feels an energy flowing through her and instinctively she knows what to do. Blaze taps into the Chaos Emerald's power and performs chaos control, pausing time before attacking Shadow in a furious anger. Once time starts back up again, Shadow goes flying back, utterly defeated. His eyes are wide, surprised that anyone else was capable of using his technique, but before he can think much about it, Blaze is on top of him, beating him mercilessly. For once, Shadow finds himself unable to defend himself as Blaze lets out all of her anger through raw, unfiltered violence. The moment drags on until Blaze's anger gives way to rational thought. She stops, staring down at Shadow as horror slowly overtakes her. Shadow is clearly hurt. Badly, worse than Blaze had ever hurt another living, breathing being. Blaze stares down at her hands and sees Shadow's blood all over them. She had gone too far, given into her rage and become something ugly and violent. Blaze looks at Shadow, the hedgehog staring up at her, and she gives him a weak apology. Shadow is confused. She won. Shouldn't she simply take her revenge? Blaze shakes her head and says that this isn't who she is. No, it's not who she wants to be. Blaze wanted to protect people, not hurt them. She can't let herself lose sight of that. Shadow stares at her, gears turning in his head, but suddenly Blaze feels a shock through her system. She collapses, Eggman behind her holding some sort of weapon. Eggman tells Shadow to get to his feet and grab the Chaos Emerald. Shadow hesitates, but slowly stands up and grabs the emerald. The pair leave Blaze and Miles behind and return to the Eclipse Cannon. Once Blaze recovers from the attack, she runs over to Miles and checks on him. He's still alive, thankfully. While she's checking on him, the boy comes to and wakes up, and the pair take a moment to regroup and be thankful that they're both safe. While all of this has been happening, Amy has been dealing with the Eclipse Cannon, having found it on the outskirts of the Ark and using her hammer to render it non-functional. Yes, this does mean that Amy and Blaze both did the exact opposite jobs that they said they were going to do, but as a wise person once said, a plan is just a list of things that don't happen. After destroying the cannon, she runs back to try and find Blaze, Miles, and Knuckles, and the group all eventually find each other after Blaze's fight with Shadow. They all tell each other what's happened, and Blaze and Miles are relieved to hear that the Eclipse Cannon has been taken care of. For a brief second, they all believe that everything is fine, until a mysterious message begins playing. A mysterious man in a lab coat tells them that his revenge has been completed, and that the Ark will crash into the Earth and destroy it in half an hour. Everyone is confused as to what this means until Eggman shows up to explain it to them. Rouge is with him, Eggman not seeing the point in keeping her tied up now. Eggman explains who Gerald is and what happened on the Ark 50 years ago. The raid, the ensuing cover-up, and Gunn's involvement in massacring the residents of the Ark. Blaze doesn't believe him, saying that he's lying, but Rouge says that Eggman is right. Blaze asks why Rouge should trust her when the Ark receives a signal from the planet. It's Commander Towers, and he's calling Rouge and asking her for a status update. Rouge says that the mission has gone completely haywire and that they need to stop the Ark from impacting the planet. Knuckles offers the Master Emerald as a solution, and from there they all develop a plan to save the planet. Blaze isn't really paying much attention to what's being said, though. Blaze is still reeling from all of this new information. Suddenly, she snaps at Rouge and the Commander, demanding an explanation. Rouge kidnapped Miles and held him for ransom, and now it turns out that she'd been working for Gunn this entire time? Blaze demands the Commander answer how they could keep someone like Rouge under their employ, or why Rouge would ever act this way on Gunn's behalf. Rouge laughs awkwardly and just says that this is her job. The Commander is less nonchalant, but he says that Rouge's work as a spy is invaluable to Gunn's operations. Blaze can't believe what she's hearing. Why keep this a secret from her? Surely Rouge and Blaze could have worked together. Rouge sarcastically asks Blaze if she knows what the word undercover means and says that being upfront with Blaze would have compromised her position as a spy. Blaze still can't believe this. Then she remembers what Eggman had told them. She asks the Commander if what he said is true, about the raid on the Ark and the ensuing cover-up. Surely Gunn would never hurt innocent people, right? The Commander is silent, but his silence is damning. Blaze now knows the truth, though she can't admit it to herself. This can't be true. It just can't be. Blaze had been working for Gunn for months. She was one of their best agents. There's no way she could have misjudged them this badly. She demands the Commander answer her directly, and he relents. Commander Towers confirms everything Eggman had said, and said that he's deeply ashamed of Gunn's past. That they've grown a lot as an organization since then. Blaze isn't hearing it. She takes out her gun badge and burns it to a crisp. From here on out, she's done with them. The Commander says that he accepts her resignation without issue. Afterwards, the Commander says he wishes them all the best of luck and ends the transmission. Things are a bit awkward after the call, but everyone eventually runs off to finish the plan. Everyone except for Blaze. She lags behind, still trying to process everything she's learned. While she's lost in thought, she spots Shadow a ways away and approaches him. Blaze asks if he's going to do anything, and Shadow says that there's no need. Everything is going according to plan. Blaze lets that linger for a moment before she apologizes to Shadow again. Shadow scoffs and says that there's no need to apologize for beating him, and certainly no reason to apologize twice, but Blaze clarifies that that's not what she's apologizing for. She says that she was wrong. Gunn isn't who she thought they were. He was right about them the whole time. Shadow asks if she's going to try and save them anyway, and after a moment of thought, Blaze says yes. Shadow is taken aback. He says that they betrayed her, that they put her and the people she cared about at risk. Miles could have been hurt due to Rouge's undercover work. Doesn't she want to destroy them? Blaze laughs and says that, yeah, she kinda does, but like she said, that's not who she wants to be. Shadow says that she's not making any sense. It's not about who anyone wants to be, it's about who they are. You are who you are, and that's all there is to it. Blaze shakes her head. You are who you choose to be, and people can be better than they are, as long as you give them a chance. Blaze apologizes again and says that she has to go. She doesn't have time to talk. She has to focus on saving the world with the others, and then she runs off. However, her words have an effect on Shadow. Something in what Blaze said stirs a memory deep inside Shadow's head, and he begins to stew on it, pulling on that thread of memory as long as he can, trying to remember something that had been buried deep within his psyche. Quick note that I want to say that I don't love giving this moment to Blaze instead of Amy in this story. Amy's role as the one who can reach out to those who are unreachable to others is a big part of her character, and I did want to stick to that, but it just wasn't natural with how this story was going. Blaze needed this moment to finish her arc with Gunn, and she and Shadow have by far the most going on between them in this version of events. Besides, Amy was able to be the shoulder for Blaze to lean on and was an important fighter throughout the story, which I still think shows off her potential as a character in its own right. I did want to pay respects to the original story, but this is the most natural way for things to play out, so that's how it's going to be right now. Anyway, after that, the characters go through the same events as canon for the most part. They all fulfill the roles in stopping the Ark from falling and eventually awaken the Bio-Lizard at the Ark's core. At that point, Shadow has had his change of heart after remembering what Maria really made him promise, and he fights the Bio-Lizard as he did in canon. And just like the original story, the Bio-Lizard fuses with the Ark to become the final hazard, and Blaze and Shadow go into their super forms to stop it. It's only at the tail end of the game that one more important change happens. At this point, Blaze is a lot more rattled than Sonic was. Blaze's lingering feelings of doubt and betrayal swirl within her as they fight the final hazard. As she and Shadow defeat it and prepare to catch the Ark, she feels her power begin to give out. She tells Shadow that she's running on empty, and Shadow admits that he's past his limit as well. With a sad smile, he says that it looks like this is going to be both of their last adventures. Blaze doesn't want to accept that, though. As the pair get ready to use Chaos Control to catch the Ark, Blaze grabs Shadow and tells him to look after Miles before pushing him away, flying towards the Ark and catching it on her own. Before Shadow can react, she uses Chaos Control on the Ark to put it into orbit by herself, falling out of her super form in the process. Shadow doesn't have enough strength to do anything but warp himself back onto the Ark, leaving Blaze outside of the Ark to presumably pass away. Spoiler, she's gonna be okay. I'm not killing off Blaze, but she is at least gonna be separated from the rest of the group for the time being. Once he's back on the Ark, Shadow explains what happened to the others. They're all shocked, and after a moment, they begin to grieve. Shadow, for his part, is mostly just in a state of shock. He already wasn't sure what he was going to do even before he went out to stop the Ark, but with Blaze's last words to him, he has become even more confused. Still, he didn't think he could simply ignore what Blaze had asked of him, considering she had sacrificed herself for his sake. With that in mind, Shadow turns to Miles and asks if the boy would be willing to forgive him. And that's where we'll leave things off for part 2. Part 3 will be coming out soon, and unless things get really out of hand, we'll finally be able to catch up with Sonic and the Soul Dimension in that part, so I hope you guys are all looking forward to it. Big shout out to Elric111 for supporting the channel, and I'll see you guys next time.